Hello, welcome back to my channel and welcome to a podcast series called In the Margins. In this series, I would like to start with a work of literature or philosophy and follow the question that it leaves behind. I want to connect it through personal reflections and interpretations, and I'm hoping that it would help me understand myself and the world better. Welcome to the first episode of this podcast titled Kierkegaard and the Despair of Being. In this episode, I would explore Kierkegaard's idea of despair that he elaborates on in his book The Sickness Unto Death. Kierkegaard says that the contemporary lifestyle according to his time, but I think it's applicable even today, leads to a sort of despair because it detaches you from your own self. There is something that Kierkegaard says in the book that really stayed with me. He says, to despair over oneself, in despair to want to rid of oneself, is the formula for all despair. What he really means here is that he describes someone who is painfully aware of their self but wants to be rid of it, as though they could reject their own existence. So, in this situation, even if they could become someone else or they could become everything that they wanted, it wouldn't help because the root issue is self rejection. And I think this is the form of despair that I have really felt all of my life, and it is only recently that I have tried to change it, tried to come out of it. And I think this is something that a lot of people experience, the despair of being oneself. And but Kierkegaard also says that despair is human beings' advantage over maybe other beings who do not feel this despair, because he sees this despair as a way of self discovery. He says that if you do not feel despair, then you cannot really find yourself, because he sees it as the first step towards really getting to know yourself. What it means is that if you don't feel this connection between the self that you are and the self that you want to be, or the self that the society wants you to be, and who you really want to be, if you don't even identify that gap, that despair, then how would you really ever close that gap? So despair is kind of the first step towards really getting to know oneself. Let's move on to Kierkegaard's definition of despair. Kierkegaard places despair in these four quadrants. On one end is finitude, on the other end is infinitude. On one end is possibility, on the other end is necessity. And he says that despair arises when you're not able to find a balance in between these extremes, between finitude and infinitude, between possibility and necessity. What it really means is that he says if you are lost in the infinitude, that is, if you're lost in deep dreams and possibility and what you could do, then you would really live in a fantasy with nothing to ground you in the real world. On the other hand, if you are lost in the finitude, that is, if you're lost in what really is, if you can't look beyond your um, daily life, or if you can't look beyond what society expects of you, the practical sort of things, then maybe you won't really get to know yourself as you would really want yourself to be. You would be lost in the society's definition of yourself. Kierkegaard says that when a person embraces both their limitations and their inner boundlessness, that is, you accept that you are bounded to this real world with your real circumstances, the finitude part of yourself, but you also accept that you have an inner boundlessness where you cannot be limited. That is when you are free from despair. Kierkegaard also says that if you get stuck in the other quadrant of possibility where you are constantly dreaming about things but you never take action, then you will be stuck in despair. On the other hand, if you are stuck in the necessity quadrant where you are very well aware of your circumstances and you take actions to kind of increase your money or status or live according to the society, then you are again stuck in despair because you're not really listening to yourself but to the outer society. And Kierkegaard says that the self cannot be manufactured from the outside. You cannot ask society to give you a perfect formula for your own perfect being. In fact, I think there should be no perfect being because everyone's version of what really brings them satisfaction is different. So, um, obviously, no one else can tell you how to be that self, which is why I feel like self help books are not really helpful because they say if you do A, B, and C, then you'll get X, Y, and Z. But it's really that simple in real life. Um, no one can tell you what would lead you to feel satisfied with life. Only you can do that. And I agree with Kierkegaard on that. So many of us live in this comfortable despair. We usually live in either of the quadrants, like all the four options that we have. We live in one of these quadrants based on what we find comfortable, and we'll comfortably spend our life there because obviously it makes you conform to the society, and or it gives you false hope that oh, you have these dreams and possibilities but you're not really doing anything, which is why you are stuck in despair. Kierkegaard says that despair is not the end, it is the beginning of yourself to choose, to become. When you feel this despair, you really get the option to choose for yourself what you want to be. I think it relates to the idea of how modern despair looks like. It can easily hide behind productivity, irony, or distraction. We don't call it despair anymore. We call it burnout, or numbness, or detachment. But it's the same question, really, how to be a self in a world that is constantly pulling you away from yourself. And Kierkegaard says that despair is the first step to really getting to know yourself because once you feel this despair, you have the option to act, to understand yourself better, to choose, to become. Coming to the other aspect of the book that I don't really agree with is how he places a lot of importance on Christianity and like how it could lead out of despair. What Kierkegaard believes is that if you stand before God, stripped of all your societal labels or values, then you can really be true to yourself. You can really see your true form. But my question really is that Kierkegaard doesn't believe in this idea of universal God or anything. He believes in the Christian God, and I think religion is more of a social symbol than a spiritual thing because if you're standing before a Christian God, then you are standing as a Christian, and Christianity in itself is a social identity that can bound yourself. So you won't really be free or stripped of your social identity if you're standing before a Christian God. So I don't really agree with his point being that if you stand before the Christian God, believe in Christianity, stripped of all your other identities, you could really be true to yourself because I believe even in that situation you would be still holding on to the social identity of Christianity. And I think it is true for any religion, like because religion is a social identity of sorts. At least according to me, it plays more of a social function than a spiritual function. Well, I think what he meant to really say was that you only become whole when you rest transparently in the power that God is, or I don't know. I feel like what he meant to say was you need to look at yourself stripped from all of your social identities, which makes sense. But for me, it just doesn't make sense to still attach yourself to a religious identity. To conclude, Kierkegaard's answer to um, find yourself by completely stripping off of your social identity, social expectations from people could be beneficial, I think. And I believe if there's one thing you could take from this video is that um, you should try to figure out a way of life that works best for you. And I think that's what Kierkegaard also says, that the society can't tell you what works for you. No one else can tell you what works for you. It's just you who knows what's the best for you in your social circumstances, in your own life. So, I don't know. Maybe this could be a push to really choose yourself in whatever way or form you can, of course, and like keeping in mind your own boundaries, limitations, challenges that you face in your life. So, yeah, I think if you are feeling despair in your life, it could be a step towards you choosing to change your circumstances in whatever way you can. Of course, sometimes we don't have that choice. In that sense, maybe it would be helpful to, I don't know, just choosing yourself over other things, maybe. If not in um, physical, proper forms, then maybe just in abstract ways, choosing yourself. Maybe like something as simple as getting a cup of tea in the morning could be an act of choosing yourself and could bring you peace in a world where you don't have other things in your own control. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I don't know if I really did justice to the book or to the thoughts or what I said made sense. See you in the next episode.